That sounds like every dictator in history.
I am not even gonna disagree with you. Can you really hold the woman you love with your blood-stained hands? All these world leaders should go back and watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because that ain't got no happy ending. Full Metal Alchemist. It's a icon of an anime that was released in 2004, so it's been 21 years since it was released. So today we're going to talk about it because in actuality I view it more as a cautionary tale, and I can't wait to impart the lessons that I've learned from it on you. So
I can't wait to hear all the lessons that you have gained. You have to suffer through Harry Potter with me.
Yeah, I have actually. So welcome to Informally Informed. I'm Garcia.
And I'm Izzy.
So I'm going to start with an overview of what Full Metal Alchemist is, because I know that you don't know anything about this. You know it's an anime.
I keep calling it Full Metal Jacket. I
Yes,
should tell you.
okay,
and then you
fair.
keep having to correct me.
So Full Metal Alchemist, if it depends. I'm going to give you the overview from the manga, okay, because it was released as a anime, a PG version of the manga, and that was just called
common.
Yeah, that was just called Full Metal Alchemist. And then a few years later, they brought out Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is a manga adaptation of the turned into an anime. Okay, so the story is around two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, who attempt to bring their dead mother back to life using forbidden techniques known as alchemy in the world of Full Metal Alchemist. And they try to do this using human transmutation. Now, I know I'm going to explain all of this, and it results in devastating consequences for the brothers. Basically, what they bring back is a homunculi, like a bastardized version of their mum who's like all arms and legs, and like it's gross. And whilst they were performing this human transmutation, which is forbidden, Edward loses his arm.
It sounds like it's for good reason as well, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
it's not like Merlin, where the guy just has a thing against magic.
No, this is... The world is magic is normal, alchemy as it is, but I'll get to that. But Edward loses his arm, and Alphonse loses his entire body. This forces Edward to bind Al's soul into a like an old suit of armor, because he needed some sort of vessel to keep the soul. Yeah,
sure, like Voldemort and Quirrell.
Yes. The brothers then embark on a quest to regain their lost body parts.
So this story begins, essentially.
Yes.
Shenanigans ensue.
And so it's the complex world of alchemy, but it also looks at military conspiracies and ethical dilemmas around their actions. Okay? So, the first lesson that it's not so much a quote, it's one of the laws that govern the actual world. So, I mentioned this before, the act of human transmutation. So, it's the act of attempting to bring a human life back through alchemy. And it's considered taboo and has severe consequences. So the reason that this is important to me, because obviously I've had a lot of loss in my life. Mm-hmm. So have you. I think you get to a certain point in your life and everybody that you know just starts to drop dead. So
that's when you know you're getting old.
Yeah, I'm at that age. So it's one of those things, especially when somebody really close to you who you truly love dies. I'm sure we've all had the thought of, I could bring this person back. If I could bring this person back to life, I would. But at what cost?
I can honestly say I've never thought that.
Well, I have. Okay. I have definitely thought. Just like, some people sit there and wait for the Harry Potter letters at 11. I was thinking, I could use this to bring so-and-so back to life. But unfortunately, life doesn't work like that. And it's the importance of dealing with loss. That's the lesson that I got from that. Instead of trying to do things to bring back that life, you should celebrate the life and you use that to remember them. Don't try and rewrite the past, because it's at what cost? Al lost his body.
Yeah.
And
Lost his
Edward
arm.
lost his arm. Yeah. And along the way, they lose so much more. So this brings up a point which it works for both the Harry Potter series and this one, because it deals with the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
Okay. In this anime, the brothers' primary goal is to find the Philosopher's Stone. It's a legendary alchemical. I can't say that. It's alchemical artifact that could potentially.
Alchemical.
Yes, that could
Just made that up.
potentially allow them to restore their bodies. Okay. What they don't know though is how the Philosopher's Stone is made. So throughout the story, we meet a character called Scar. Scar is
a lion who has a kid.
wrong show. Scar is a survivor of the Ishvalan Civil War. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, the entirety of the Ishvalan people were sacrificed. Their souls were sacrificed in order to make this Philosopher's Stone. The bodies were used as material, essentially, to make this stone.
Sort of like making a Horcrux.
Yes, sort of like making a Horcrux, except millions of souls and ultimate power.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Scar, I'm talking about Scar specifically because I do have a very important quote from him, because of the way that the Philosopher's Stone is made in the show. It's essentially, it's guided by the principles of equivalent exchange, wherein in order to get something, you have to give something of equal value. Okay, so even though, like, you know, in most shows they show you that alchemy or anything like that, most anime anyway, it's unrealistic. Well, it's all unrealistic, but it shows that you could show like turn stone into gold or something like that. That's not equivalent, because gold's a precious metal. It's not equivalent. Okay, so in order to get the power, they sacrificed all these unwitting people to their death.
That sounds like every dictator in history.
Yeah, I know. I am not even going to disagree with you, because the show itself is actually set in like a World War II sort of setting, wherein they are it's like a pre-World War II Europe. So if you imagine that sort of thing. So I mentioned before about military conspiracies and all the rest of it. The military is involved in this. The show itself looks at the science, military, and the people, everyday people, and how it is that they come together to work around some of the issues, the power struggles that are happening. So, as I said before, the anime and manga, the central theme is the law of equivalent exchange, wherein nothing can be gained without something of equal value being lost. It's a fundamental in alchemy, even in the regular world. Ancient philosophers and alchemists there said the exact same thing. However, this law has been used in a way that doesn't benefit the people, but instead swords power. Okay.
Swords power.
Hoards
power.
Hoards it. Hoards it. So, because it's all well and good trying to do this, trying to get back their bodies and all the rest of it, going across Emethris, which is the country itself, to go try and get their body back. But they need money, resources, and such. So, because of this, Edward joins the military.
I mean, of course.
Of course. And he joins...
Power 101, innit?
Of course. He joins the state military as a state alchemist, as the full Metal Alchemist, because he's got a metal arm at this point. Yeah. Which allows him to access the resources and information. Okay, because he needs information about where to get this Philosopher's Stone. Because at the beginning of the anime, he does not know how the Philosopher's Stones are made. He just knows that in order to get back his arm and Al's body, he needs a Philosopher's Stone.
So, in order for Voldemort to get his body back, he needs the Philosopher's Stone.
So as we go through, we meet various people, both military personnel and scientists. I'll go through sort of the, as I was going through this, and I rewatched some of the anime, it reminded me of some of the more painful parts of the anime. I will get to the Shao Tucker of it all. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. I'll start with this quote. The weak, I'll tell you who said it. The weak will become the foundation for the country, while the strong will flourish above them. This was a quote taken by the military leader, Father. No, he's not Father at this point. He's Wrath at this point. And he is basically, this is supposed to be the moral dilemma of it all. Is it okay to get power by stepping on others in order to get there? And if not, how do you get that power? Is it okay to sacrifice the lives of millions to get there?
Not millions.
Well, they had to in order to create the Philosopher's Stone, but it is quite the moral dilemma of how things are done. Hi, Goku. But the show generally shows the dangers of science, alchemy, and faith. Because although it's not a faith-based show, there are periods throughout where people turn to their faith. When things have gone terribly wrong for the Ishvalans, they're a very religious group, so it was easy for the military to get rid of them. When one of the first episodes saw Al and Ed going to the desert on the search for the Philosopher's Stone, they come across a town with a false priest, who's basically saying that he's performing miracles. Okay. It turns out that these miracles that he was performing were false miracles and were in fact science. So it's, how do you differentiate? How do you know what's faith-based truth or what's science? Because even in the real world, a lot of people argue, especially scientists that believe in God, that they wouldn't have science without God. And in certain aspects, not everything can be explained through science.
Well, it can, because that's the definition of science. Just because there's no answer as of yet, that doesn't mean it cannot be explained through
but
science.
But it's not an excuse. But science isn't the be-all and end-all. And this is also part of the lessons of this show, which is not to rely so much on science, because it was the science that created the Philosopher's Stone. But it's also the science, in the name of the science, that millions lost their lives. So
vaccines.
Vaccines.
Hashtag trust the science, guys.
Well, yeah. I mean, while I was going through this, I was thinking, oh, did we not just go through this with the old pandemic?
Right. Right. Okay. The definition of science is to explain everything that there is. So that is science.
But it
just
can't
because
be
you don't have
explained.
An answer, that doesn't mean there isn't one.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that science is the way to explain it either. And this is part of the philosophy. How else are you going
to explain it?
Faith. A lot of people explain things through faith. Water to wine, that's an alchemical, it would be alchemy, because it's properties. You're literally turning properties from one thing to the next. Science.
But you're not though, are you? Because that never actually happened.
But you don't know that. You weren't there. A lot of people, even if you're scientists, a lot of scientists do have faith. Anyway, this is my lessons. Mind your business.
Fine, I will sit here and say nothing for the next 20 minutes then.
Okay, if you promise. Okay. But to that point, this brings me to my next quote, which is, alchemists are scientists, you see. We don't believe in creators and God. And such, we observe the physical laws that govern this world and pursue truth. Edward Elric. However, as we come to later in the anime, he ends up having to essentially take this back because he sees the dangers of science. And I'm going to explain to you where the dangers would lie. So this brings me nicely back to Shao Tucker. Shao Tucker was in the show, he's an alchemist who is trying to create talking chimeras. Okay.
Naturally.
If he doesn't do this, then the government...
If I was an alchemist, that's the first thing I'd do.
I mean, the way that he goes about this is not the way forward, but the alchemist, the military says that they will pull his funding if he doesn't provide the results, which is a talking chimera. Okay.
Because so it's like Fauci.
He had produced one before, around the same time his wife went missing. Okay. On their merry way for the Philosopher's Stone, Alphonse and Ed meet a young girl. Okay? She is Nina Tucker, Shao Tucker's daughter. They also, they don't meet many people around their age. They're still children. Even though he's joined the military, but then that's also a moral argument about children joining the military, which is 16 in the UK, you can join the military. Anyway, so they become really good friends with Nina Tucker. They get to know her, they start to play with her, they become friends with her dad, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful way in which they showed the friendship building. Okay? Al and Ed end up having to leave, and they say goodbye to Nina Tucker. Wish her good luck. Tell her that on their way back from where they're going, they will stop in and see how she's doing. Alright? They go off on their merry way. They come back. They don't see Nina Tucker. They don't see the family dog. But what they do see is a talking chimera saying, "Come play with me," which is what Nina Tucker used to always say to Ed and Al. Now, I'm not a very good storyteller, okay?
I'm getting that impression.
Yeah. But this was one of the most triggering moments in anime for a lot of people. A lot of people were like, even now, it brings up a lot of really bad vibes, man. Really bad vibes. That Shao Tucker did this for money. He essentially killed his child and the family dog for science.
So what's the lesson? Don't sacrifice your child for science. How can the average person adopt that message into their everyday life? You know, the ones that aren't child sacrifices.
Well, thank you for that question, Izzy. That's not the lesson. The lesson here is not to do everything for money. They could have been fine. Him and his daughter, he could have survived and looked after his daughter, but instead he chose to fulfill the military's whims, essentially kill his child, the family dog too, after he'd already lost his
But also the child, mainly the child.
Mainly the child. I mean, Tucker stated that it's what science demanded. That's why he did it. Tucker is essentially saying that science is at fault here. It forces us, this scenario forces us not just to rely on science. It also shows the many dangers of just following along orders. You should question
science, right? It's like the dark. It is neutral. The dark can hide your attacker from you, but it also can hide you from your attacker.
However,
science is like that. Money is also like that. It can be used for great good or great evil, depending on whose hands it's in.
But the lesson here is to not reduce the truth to science, faith, or philosophy. There has to be more internally. That's the lesson that I took from it, is that there has to be more internally. So he could have been happy with him, his daughter, and his dog. But instead he chose to blindly follow orders instead. None of his own moral functions came into play here.
Does he have moral functions?
He did
If
at
he's
the
just
beginning.
an arsehole, then
No, this is it. They showed him to be a very lovely man, a loving father, devoted husband to his deceased wife, but still, still in a memory and all the rest of it. Only for him to turn around and do this for the sake of money and science. I took from that, even though I know you're going to say I'm not really plotting any kind of mass Philosopher's Stone event, but you never know. And I also took from that people are not to be reduced to alchemic ingredients, but to instead preserve life. You should do what you, as leaders, as people that we're not leaders really, but as people that are in the world, we should be doing our best to preserve life, not doing whatever we can to take it. This is apt currently.
I agree. I concur, and I made that point in our lessons of Harry Potter.
Did you?
Yeah, but every life is equal and every life is worth saving.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll bring this back to Scar because I did kind of mention the Ishvalan War. It's Ishvalan. I say Ishvalan for some reason. War, and the devastation of that. It's the devastation of wanting that power escalation because of wanting power. Okay, so it's power for the sake of power, regardless of whoever is being trampled on for that.
Yeah.
So even though the show is like I said, it's about science. Edward states about Scar, one of the last remaining Ishvalans who's out there to get revenge for his Ishvalan people who were just sacrificed. He said he's just dressing his ugly for vengeance in the mantle of God and calling himself an agent of justice. Should I say it again? So he's just dressing up his ugly thirst for vengeance in the mantle of God and calling himself an agent of justice.
Like Batman.
Exactly like Batman. But in this case, it's also the dangers of just following faith. Because there's a lot of leaders like this who hide their ugly under a quest for justice.
Yeah.
And that's what I took from that, is ugly isn't just skin deep. And you can't just use God or whatever your beliefs are to hide from the ugly things that you do. Don't dress up a fucking chicken and tell me it's a turkey. So at the end of all of this, at the end of when Al and Ed sacrifice their bodies to try and get back their mother's soul and body, they come to a gate. Okay, it's like a door that opens, like a big massive door in a white space, and what they find on the other side of that is truth. Okay, so it's no God or anything like that. The God in this
like a
is
big door
truth.
that says truth.
No. It's like a truth has no form except like a black ball that's like floating. So that is what's at the other end is truth. So regardless of the science, regardless of the faith, all that's left is truth.
That's what one should be searching for.
Yeah. So in the show, truth is the ultimate God. And regardless of beliefs and ideology, truth is what the brothers find. Truth is the ultimate price for everything. When the doors open and Father, who's a homunculi, I didn't even get into the homunculus, which are named after the 7 deadly sins. They're the baddies. Truth opens the door and says to Edward, I am the truth of your despair. And to me, that hit me when I was younger. Because I was like, beyond the noise, all that's left is what actually happened. That's it. You can dress it up, you can justify it, you can do all of those things.
And you know what?
But what's left is truth.
You know what? Everybody has the ability to justify anything to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what their actions are. Everybody has that ability to justify their actions to themselves.
I agree. And it's that self-delusion that's that causes strife, really. So throughout the show, we meet various different people in the military, and Roy Mustang is one of fan favorite characters, because he's a general in the army who's Edward's boss. Okay, he's also a fire user, but he can't use his powers in the rain, so he carries with him a lighter because he's got a fire user. It's quite cool. I thought it was a quite cool little Easter egg thing. And at one point, Roy Mustang says, and I quote, "Can you really hold the woman you love with your blood-stained hands?" Don't ask me why 21 years later that still runs through my mind like crazy. It stops me from doing things. I know prison stops me from really committing crimes, but this quote running around my mind also stops me, which is can you really hold the woman you love with your blood-stained hands?
I mean, you can, but how can you, like...
I mean, you can, sure, but...
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. Like, you can... If you do certain things in your life that you know you're gonna... You know that you've done them. How can you look somebody in the eye that sees you in a certain light when you know that you've done these things?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that in time can effectively destroy relationships because you know you've done it. That person might never find out,
but you know,
and
it will eat away at you.
And every time you look at them, you're going to be thinking, I'm not the person that they think I am.
Yep.
Yeah,
that explains it. Like, it's a freaking joke. Like I said, throughout these 21 years, that's kept me seriously on the straight and narrow, because I've oftentimes, when I could make rash decisions, I stop and think, can I hold the woman I love with my blood-stained hands? And it doesn't necessarily, for me, it's not literal blood, even though sometimes it is. But not these days, I ain't crashing out. But for the most part, it's not. It's those moral grey areas.
Yeah.
I as I said, it's only in the last 10 years that there's ever been moral grey areas for me, because prior to that, there just wasn't. It's either one thing or the next. And I've always said that if you don't stand by your morals, what do you stand by? As Hamilton said, which I will come to, I can't wait to do my Hamilton lessons video. If you fight for nothing, Burr, what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to bring in more into the military stuff because of how important the military is to the story. The quest to gather the 1 million stones to create multiple Philosopher's Stones is done by the military. Okay? Edward says, alongside when he's clashing with Roy Mustang, in a scene in which they have a massive argument out in the rain, just after the Shao Tucker situation, he says, alchemists are supposed to be pillars of science and truth, but turn into the military's walking weapons. And that's what I think would happen if human beings got superpowers in this day and age.
Like the Winter Soldier.
Like the Winter Soldier. I've quite often thought of this. Even even in a more realistic level, technology, the way that technology is going now, AI, all of those things, drones, etc., etc. A lot of these were not created as military weapons. They were created to better human life. But along the way, they get turned into military weapons.
Humans are resourceful.
Humans are destructive.
And resourceful.
Resourceful, sure, but destructive.
They can be two things at once.
They will see even the things that are for the most beneficial reasons and turn it into a political or a military ploy.
Yes.
And that's what I took from that, is that human beings cannot actually be trusted.
True.
I mean, as you know,
It's like when what's his name? Richard Feynman. Do you know Richard Feynman?
I don't think I do.
He's a very famous scientist from back in the day. A lot of his lectures are still online. He's a physicist. Very, very intelligent guy. I believe he won the Nobel Prize for something.
Science, probably.
Yeah, sure. Nobel Prize winner. Very, very intelligent guy. His book is called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. It's an absolutely fantastic read. He did all these really cool experiments and stuff. And he was one of the scientists. He actually knew Albert Einstein. It was at the same period in time. He died in the 80s, I think.
Oh.
He was one of the physicists involved in the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, in the desert in the US. And have you seen The Imitation Game?
No.
Okay. Well,
I know what it's about.
Yeah, The Imitation... We totally did a reaction to that. We totally need to do a reaction to that because that was like literally one of my favourite movies of all time. But anyway, in The Imitation Game, they have voiceovers. And one of the lines in it is that, as they have their little montage, them solving equations, is Alan Turing saying, people talk about the war and they talk about the Blitz and the bombs coming in and the houses blowing up and this, that and the other. The war wasn't like that for us. Because Bletchley Park, it was in the middle of nowhere. There was no London to get blitzed. It was no city. It was out in the country. He's like, the war wasn't like that for us. The war was a bunch of 10 people sat in a room with pieces of paper in front of us solving equations. And we did that for 5 years. So all these other people have these big dramatic stories about wartime for them. And it was completely different for us. And Richard Feynman said exactly the same thing. We were... in Manhattan Project, we were trying to split the atom. That was the goal, to split the atom, because the atomic bomb existed in theory. They had to figure it out and put it into practice. And he said we spent the majority of the war doing our equations, and we got so focused on this end goal that everything else went out the window. We got up every day, dead excited. We sat down, we did our equations, we did our maths, and we did that for years on end. And then the guy that originally had brought him in, because he'd said, oh, by the way, this is the thing, do you want to come in and see if you can do it? And Richard Feynman at the beginning was like, I'm not sure I want any part of this. And then his friend had to persuade him, look, it's going to help us win the war, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, but in the future, we don't know what the atomic bomb is going to be used for, right? Anyway, he manages to persuade him, goes in, a couple of years later, they succeed. They did the test in the American desert. They blow the bomb up, and everyone's so excited because they spent years obsessively focused on this one thing. And it was the guy that brought him in was the only person not cheering. Richard Feynman turns to him and was like, is everything okay? And he just looks at him and goes, it's a terrible thing we've created here. And everybody else had completely forgotten that aspect of it because that had been the goal for so long, and that they'd finally achieved what they'd been working on. You should read his autobiography. It's very good.
I will. Why not? So with this, I'm going to end this on a positive note. Throughout the show, Ed and Al come to realise that human life is more important than power. Okay?
A lot of people in today's society forget that.
Yeah.
Especially the world leaders.
Yeah. That's what I said. It's super apt now. For all these world leaders should go back and watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because that ain't got no happy ending. Anyway, so I'll end this on a positive note and a positive quote from Azumi, who is Ed and Al's one of their teachers that they met along the way. Her name's Azumi Curtis. She's a skilled alchemist, and she trained the Elwick brothers to serve. That she serves as a mentor figure for them throughout the show. She says, "When you live, your life will end sooner or later. The body will return to the earth. Grass and flowers will grow on top of it. The soul will nourish the hearts, and it will live on in the hearts of other people." The positive note here is, in order for that to happen, there has to be other people left to remember you. So all these world leaders need to remember that. they're always talking about legacy. I know that we're going to be doing a Trump video at some point, but they're always talking about legacy and what it is that they want to leave. If there's no one to remember you, there's no one to write those history books. There's no people around. There's no history to remember.
There's always going to be people around. No one getting nuked. No one ain't getting nuked.
But you know, as again, Hamilton said, you know, legacy. Who writes your story?
It reminds me of that scene from Troy, the movie. Have you seen Troy?
No.
It's got what's his name in?
I know he's got it.
Achilles.
In it. Brad Pitt's in it, isn't it?
Brad Pitt's in it. He plays Achilles, and Achilles has got a family. He's got kids. He's got a wife. He's got, you know, all that good stuff. He's got it made, and then he's obviously one of the best fighters. Ain't nobody beat him.
Achilles.
He's Achilles. Yeah, he just goes and he like kills people, blah blah blah, and then some dude runs off with Helen of Troy, and then, you know, 1,000 ships are launched, and Achilles is asked to go fight. He's debating whether or not to go, because everybody knows he's the best guy. You know, you got him on your side. It's a sure thing, right? And one of his advisors or whatever turns to him and says, if you choose not to go, you will live a fantastic life. You will be happy. And you will live a good, honest life, and you will have a wife that loves you, and you will have sons that will grow up to be fantastic human beings, and then you will die an old man, and you'll be a happy man. And after you're gone, your children will remember you, and their children after that will remember you, and perhaps they will tell tales of what you were like to their children. But after that, your name will be lost forever. Or you can go fight this battle. You might not live to be an old man, but your name will live on in history. And that's the decision he's got to make between his legacy living on forever or him living a good life with his family. And he decides to go.
I guess in this it's at the expense of, because I guess it comes back, for me, it comes back down to what would you do for the power, and at the expense of who? Because 1 million people were sacrificed, the Ishvalan civil war, to make a philosopher's stone, something that they had no say in, that had no benefits to them. They were dead, just used as ingredients essentially. And so with that, I'm going to bring this episode to an end. Join us next time on our lesson series, when we'll be talking about, well, it'll be
something else.
Izzy's turn, yeah. We'll be talking about our next lessons. And feel free to join the conversation. Let us know what lessons you've taken from Full Metal Alchemist, or any of the things that you find interesting.
See you next time, guys.
Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our views. That's the point of the conversation. Join in.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.